What's up, guys? Ming the Merciless 93 here with part 2 of this 4-part series back on the PokerVIP.com. When you last left your hero, we had finished up playing Ace-Queen offsuit by folding to a donk bet on the flop. Wasn't too interesting, gotta tell you. We'll see what we got going on at this table today. Deuce 4. Not much you can really do with that. No one's really complaining. We were talking about 3-betting, we were talking about 4-betting, and different types of combinations to use. I like Ace-5 suited for a 4-bet bluff. I like King-Queen offsuit. I like 8-6 suited. You want a little something for each part of the deck, and that's a pretty good spread. And King-Queen offsuit being my favorite bluffing combination. Again, everything is sort of, I mean, you can think about what combinations you want to use for different things from a theory perspective, and then everything else is going to relate to your opponent, because exploiting your opponents is going to make you more money than balance, because that is how you make the most money. You exploit something that your opponent does too much or too little of in the game. A lot of the times that, balance is going to be your highest EV line. That will definitely be the case as well. But sometimes your opponents are just going to be so glaringly in one way or the other, bluffing way too much, bluffing way too little, that just making exploitative adjustments outside of balance is going to be relatively easy for you. It's important to have all of these tools in your kit, so to speak, so that you can employ the ones that make the most sense at the right time. And if you're playing in a tough game full of a bunch of regs and you don't know anybody, you don't have any reads on their frequencies, then playing in a balanced manner is generally going to be your best strategy until you see something that gives you a little bit of concrete evidence. It's also important not to make too many adjustments too soon, because small sample, you could be wrong a pretty high percent of the time. And if you start making big adjustments based on small samples, you run the risk of spewing every which way. And, you say, well, I didn't think it was like that. Oh, if I'd have known that he was like this. Oh, if I'd have known. So if you just make good, balanced decisions, and if you see something glaring that makes a lot of sense to try and exploit, then go ahead and try to do so. But it's important to be able to go from balance to exploitation and understand why you're doing what you're doing, when you're doing what you're doing, both from a theory perspective and from an exploitation perspective. We have a King 6, it's not amazing, we limp in, we just check fold his board. I'm perfectly okay just folding combos like that, but once you start getting 3-4 to 1, it's not really all that bad with like a garbage king or a garbage ace, suited trash. You're just going to have to play a lot of hands because you're getting a relatively good price. You definitely are going to win the pot less often in general because there's more players, but that's okay. You make a strong top pair, you make a straight, you have some suited combos. Suited combos are the best because they make flushes. Flushes are awesome. 4-8 offsuit. That'll be in the folding range. Jack 4 offsuit, down the drain. Yeah, so everything sort of starts with balance, and then you divert from it based on your opponent's frequencies, what they're doing too much or too little of, and you try to take advantage of that without necessarily letting them know that you're trying to take advantage of that. You don't want to go so far out of your way that they stop doing it. You want your opponent to keep leaking money to you. Keep leaking the money. We got the King of Hearts and the Jack of Diamonds. We raise it up. And this is a board texture where we are going to continuation bet and then be done with it. Against a tough player, you can definitely just check back here. And I probably don't need to bet this big. I could probably bet somewhere like 60 cents and get the same result. But yeah, you don't really want to over c-bet ace-high boards against good players because they're going to have a little, they're going to have more aces in their range, first of all. But an ace-high board is relatively hard to barrel, and they are going to be interacting a bit more often with you. So it's going to put you in more difficult spots on the turn in the river, because if you're over c-betting and they realize that and they start floating or check-raising some, then your C-bets are going to drop in value drastically. And then when you get to the turn, you're going to have so many combos that bet the flop that you're not going to be able to continue barreling on the turn at a very high frequency at all. And once that happens, that leaves you exposed to facing a river bet. And their river bet sizing can definitely put you in a world of hurt with medium strength hands. They start overbetting, especially bad news bears. So against a good player, you're going to want to check more flops. Check more ace-high flops. It's kind of the bottom line. And that's not saying that you can't bluff in a future street. It's just that when my fold equity goes down on one street because my opponent knows that I'm overbetting, not overbetting from a sizing perspective, but I'm betting too frequently, then they're going to interact with that. And if they perceive your check back bet range to be a lot stronger than your bet ace high board range, pretty good chance that you're going to have a higher success rate against that thinking player on that ace high board. Now, if you can pinpoint that they're folding to 2 and 3 streets a lot of the time, even if they have a weak ace, well, then you can just start going bananas. But again, you're going to want some sense of balance before you know that you can exploit, late decisions from your opponents. Deuces here in a 4-way pot, out of position, no equity, pretty simple, no-brainer. We just check and we fold. Pocket sevens, we can flat, we can 3-bet. I think flatting is perfectly fine. And then I think that if you have something like deuces through sixes, we can 3-bet those combos and have those in our bluffing range, because those combos don't fare as well. The more you have regs behind you who are squeezing a lot, the more you're going to want to 3-bet pre-flop as a bluff with these hands that are best, but they don't want to be squeezed. They want to either get to the flop cheap, which in a passive table where the blinds are not that aggressive, if they're kind of on the loose side, you definitely want to flat these implied odds hands, which flop a polarized distribution of equity between having a ton of equity or drawing to 2 outs. And we're just going to go ahead and check back here. Too many hands interact. We're not really going to win the pot that often. And if we hit a 7, that's a pretty damn fine card for us. So yeah, if you are not at an aggressive table and you can get to a flop a lot, then you're fine flat calling. And if you are going to get squeezed a lot, you're going to want to mix in a few slow plays to protect your flats, or just 3-bet quite a lot. And here we just go ahead and get out of dodge. Not really much we can do. But yeah, just think about that. Anytime your opponent has a decision tree that doesn't put pressure on you, that just basically calls or folds, that makes your life relatively easy, because you already know that it's not very likely that they're going to put you in a tough spot and raise again. Think about it. Let's say you have a flush draw and you bet the flop and your opponent calls, and you figure if he had a good hand, he would have check raised the flop. So you go ahead and you double barrel your flush draw, and then your opponent check raises the turn. That's a nightmare for you, because now there's a good chance you just have to fold your garbage flush draw when it has it really does have a decent amount of equity. So if you're in that kind of a spot and you think that your opponent is going to be raising on that future street, then you might do something a little bit different. Well, we're going to go ahead and bet with our king queen in this scenario. You might check back the turn rather than double barrel. But if your opponent has a bluff raising frequency on the turn, or just a raising frequency in general, then you're going to have to give consideration to checking back the turn with some of your draws that want to realize their equity, especially if stacks aren't deep enough to play to call and then play a river. We're going to isolate, and this is not a great board. Generally, it's interacting pretty well with one of the two of the guys. We don't really have any redraws. A jack of spades specifically, as you can see, comes up, and that is kind of a meh card where we're chopping a lot, or they're drawing to a boat and not paying us off, or we're just annihilated by a flush. Excuse me. And there's the ace and there's the king. So we definitely were not getting any folds on that board, but we weren't going to get too much value on that turn. Womp, womp. Can't do anything with the 4-9 offsuit. I 3-bet you. But it goes pretty. I guess at the baseline, it relates back to equity realization and denial. And as solvers teach people more, and solvers have played so many hands against themselves, they're teaching themselves, we're learning just how important equity denial and realization is in poker. And even if you did things because of that concept. It wasn't necessarily illustrated as that concept. It was just, I know that this is a good play. I know that this is a better play than this play because it makes sense for this reason or that reason, but it was never really illustrated as denial and realization, which is kind of where we're at now. That's why sizings are slightly bigger pre-flop, especially out of position. That's why you're betting more marginal hands, which are the best hand often, but can be outdrawn very easily. So there's a lot of different things that are happening these days in poker. A little bit of realization of the realization. I think it's good to embrace those changes because it makes you a better player. So this guy's only got 7 funky ass dollars. We're just gonna flat with our pair because this guy's got $25. It's not a spot you want to 3-bet and then get it in pre-flop. We just want to flop our set or get the hell out of Dodge. That's our binary position. No set, get out of here. And Motown, we're just gonna check in the big blind. Definitely just gonna be folding the deuces. We have the jack of spades. We got some backdoor stuff going on here. It wouldn't be the worst hand to lead out with on the flop, but we're probably just going to check. Probably just going to check and let these donkeys jump around the rodeo themselves. And we're going to fold versus the pot-sized bet. What can you do? We have king-queen. This could be a fair 3-bet, depending on who's opening. This dude opens, troop, and he's been a bit of a calling station. So normally I would be 3-betting in this spot, but I think this is actually a reasonable spot to just flat call. This is one of those executive decision scenarios where your hand's kind of too good to fold against a weaker competition, but you don't really think that you have much fold equity. So I'll just go ahead and flat call anyway, because I think the competition's weak enough to not take advantage of the fact that I'm out of position as well as somebody else. And as you can see, he bets 20 cents in a 2.8. Obviously, our hand doesn't interact here, but if it did interact, then we would have a really easy time in this spot. It wouldn't be difficult at all. I think I'm just going to go ahead and check back here with just nothing going on. We didn't hit that board at all. If he checks the turn, I'll probably bet the turn and bet the river. And, you know, this is kind of a weird spot with our king-queen. We're kind of in rough shape, but we're just going to go ahead and check, or fold rather, to the 20-cent bet, because if we hit a king or a queen, it might not be good. Somebody could have 7s or a 6. It's not all that great. Looks like the delayed c-bet's going to take it down. We have a blocker to ace-jack there, so that's pretty good. If he had a pair and a heart, or if he had a flush, if he had a set, he probably bets a turn. So when he checks twice in the 3-bet pot there's a pretty good chance that we're just going to be winning the majority of the time with a bet. But yeah, you're getting a pretty good price here, but again, don't be calling on a spot where if you improve your hand, it could still be roasted. That's a problem. Homeboy leads 20 cents. We have the ace of spades, so we're not really worried about too many things. We also have backdoor straight draw. If he has an ace, it's generally beating us unless it's ace 2, ace 3. It's not really all that amazing of a scenario. We're just going to go ahead and call here on the turn as well. The turn, his sizing still looks like he's just got a 7 or an ace. If he has an ace, we're still not in great shape. And we do have a club in our hand, which blocks backdoor clubs. He wouldn't have too many clubs anyway. We block 5, 6. We're just going to call here and lose to all of his ace-x combos, basically. And he has pocket kings in a dream. I'm not really entirely sure how he's getting there. Pocket kings, but nonetheless it happens. But yeah, his sizing on the river is so small that we're just kind of like, well, it's another one of those spots where I'd rather call and be wrong than fold and be wrong. That's one of those spots where you just go, oh, well, you got me. And you flip the chips in. Mwah. Goodbye, chips. Goodbye, poker chips. Oh man, we would have had 2 pair here. What in the world? Ace 4 of clubs. This is definitely an isolation raise. Not an unreasonable 3-bet combo given the right positions. I like it. Not an unreasonable 4-bet combo. And we're going to raise it up here with this 8-9 of diamonds. So we have the nut flush draw, and the problem here, again, is that we have a board texture where everybody and their brother interacts. So you're going to want to bet this type of a combo, But this is a board where you can give up with a lot of combos, especially even overpairs are not super happy here. I think we can just call. If we raise, we open the action, which isn't a great thing. And we can definitely just see a turn card in position. And if he has a 10, he's probably never folding. If we get re-raised, it really sucks. It's easy for us to call and then play another street. We have another player in the hand. Oh my god, opener is very flush. We're just going to call here. I think we're just going to fold in this spot, guys, with a nut flush draw. Chances are they just have made hands there, and we're essentially going to be boned, as you can see. And we are going to lose here to a king a lot, or an ace. The only thing we're really beating is a queen 10 or queen jack of, some sort of flush draw. Yeah, it's that. But they play relatively passive and weird a lot of the time. We just kind of take our equity on the turn and call and not really going to bluff the river. Your 9 doesn't have a lot of showdown value there because if he's betting on the turn, he generally has an ace or a king. And again, players are relatively passive, so I'm not surprised to see him check back an ace on the river, or just check an ace on the river and either try to bluff catch or try to do something, try to do something funky, whatever he's trying to do. Whether it's passivity or whether it's because he wants to catch a bluff. We're just going to go ahead and better open at a straight draw. Not always going to get folds here. Definitely has a bunch of hands that do interact. Looks like we caught him with a king high or an ace high or something. We got the old queen 8 offsuit. Queen 8 offsuit. Yes, indeed. Not much going on here with queen 8 offsuit. We will be raising it up. Blind versus blind, though. And with the 8 of diamonds here and the queen, we're just going to go ahead and continuation bet. We got an overcard. We got the 8 of diamonds, a little bit of backdoor straight draw and flush draw. We're blocking a good bit of his continuing range. And the 7 is not an amazing card. We do have some 7s in our range, but he's not going to fold a 7, a 10, and now he's not going to fold a 4 either. We're basically just beating, we're beating nothing now. We're beating 2s and 3s. And he ends up having 6, 8. Double gutter. You have to assume that he bluffed somewhere, but he didn't. It's important to keep that in mind, because when you see a guy who just checks down 8 high after calling a bet that has position, his bluffing frequency is just going to be non-existent, which means he's either going to have to whimsically bluff sometime where he just randomly blows up out of nowhere, or you just don't want to pay him off, you know what I mean? He's just going to not have that many bluffs, so he's going to have more of a value-oriented range. And if your hand doesn't play well against a value range, then you should just be getting out of dodge. Even if your hand is strong from an absolute hand strength perspective, if it's so bad that there's too many combos that beat you and you're drawing equity from essentially bluffs and slightly worse value combos, it's time to get out of dodge, because those types of players, they don't bluff enough. As you can see, homie he ain't got nothing, I get it. Some guys are scared of the double paired board as well. Some guys are super, super scared. We are going to check our king of clubs deuce. And not really much going on here in the 6-way family pot. We have the king of clubs, dun 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 dun, but that's really not going to do much for us. We got 60 cents. Call. Hey man, not everybody can have a 5 or a flush or a 10. What in the hell what are people doing over there? You can have 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10x, 8s of clubs. It's going to be a weird one. Ghost Rider 1 has disconnected from the game. He's ghost ridden himself right on out of dodge. Why? I couldn't tell you. Come on, guys. Let's go here, Ghost Rider. Make a decision, bruh. Connect yourself or disconnect yourself. Whatever it is. Oh my god, a royal flush draw. Plum bananas. Alright. We're going to fold the 8 deuce offsuit. not going to see a showdown there, unfortunately. We have King 9, which could be playable in some scenarios. Queen 10 not going to be playable from the small blind here. No, sir, no, sir. We can definitely limp the King 9. You don't want to isolate trash out of position. You just want to take the good pot odds. And I think that a lot of the time, players do not flat call or smooth call in the small blind enough of the time. When you have a multitude of limpers out there, you're getting a really good price. You know, a lot of the times you're getting like 6 to 1, 7 to 1, 8 to 1. If your hand is any bit close to suited, making a straight, one high card and a mediocre low card, they're just going to profit, man. Like, they're just reasonable hands to play. We don't play well out of position here with the King 9 offsuit, though, so we're just going to fold pre-flop. So you really want to continue in those spots, and I think a lot of people play way too tight in the small blind. And I think the bottom line is that by playing those hands, if you're accumulating a small amount of chips, then you're losing less than if you had just folded. So that is the important idea there. It's not, because everything here in this game is long term. It's not just what's happening immediately, and some of this stuff can feel out of place. You know, it can feel counterintuitive. Like, I don't want to play this trash out of position when I'm going to lose a lot. And yeah, sure, you are going to lose a lot, but if you win enough to accumulate chips long term, then you're winning more by playing the hand, even though you're losing it a lot of the time, than you are if you would fold the hand. So it's just, I think that's an important concept. You know, people are, well, you know, is this profitable? Yes, but it feels uncomfortable because it's going to cause you variance, because to get to that point where the hand is profitable, you need multiple samples of that spot. You need to have that spot played over and over and over and over again. So if I'm getting 9 to 1 with King 9 offsuit and I limp in and we see a flop, I'm going to lose it a bunch before I win a couple of times. You know, like, over time, you're going to show a profit in that spot. And I think that's important for people to realize and keep at the forefront of their thought process when they're making decisions, both pre and post flop, because they often think about it in terms of what's happening immediately in the short term, and that's not the best way to think about it. Accumulating chips is accumulating chips. If it's a really big, crazy spot, like it's 200 big blinds to win like a fraction of a blind, yeah, you can probably pass on that spot if you're going to go berserk mentally on tilt and, you know, can't take it anymore or whatever else. I mean, sure, then you have the EV of A-game mentality versus spew tilt mentality to think about, and it's probably more plus EV for you to pass on that spot. But if your mental game wouldn't falter in any bit, any capacity, and your bankroll could take it, then you should, you know, go bananas. Push every single edge you can, especially in a cash game. Oh my God, we would have had 2 pair here. We would have roasted that guy with his aces. Not much we can do there when it goes 3-bet and then limp re-raise. And then pot size jam. But that guy had like less than a bet, whatever. Less than a bet left. You're a bet man. You're a bet man. He's a bet man. I'm not really sure why I'm singing to you guys between hands here. I also don't know what the hell this guy's doing. He needs more time. You need more time? Yeah, well, we don't have any of that, man, because this is planet Earth and we're about to be killed by a giant volcano in Yellowstone Jelly National Park or whatever the hell it's called. Where was that place that Boo Boo and fucking Yogi Bear went for a picnic? That was the place, right? Jellystone National Park. Hey, Boo Boo, what's the matter with you? That's pretty thugged out, man. It's pretty thugged out. Now here we can go ahead and bet to protect our equity. This is not really a value bet. It's just that betting is better than checking. We have a blocker to the straight, and we have a pair. And if they don't have a king, our hand is good a lot. They have ace high. They have 4x. We can get value. We can win the pot now. We can protect our hand. There's a lot of functions of a bet, and you don't really have to define it as black and white as this is a value bet or this is a bluff. It's just that betting is simply better than checking. Folding ace 9. And I think that it's difficult to grasp concepts like that if you try to look at them in such a black and white way. You try to look at it and say, well, that's just a bluff, or that's just a value bet. I mean, it can be one or the other, sure, but that's just an element of the bet itself. How many times do you see somebody value bet thinly on a river and they get their opponent to fold a better hand? Well, what is that? Is that a value bluff? right? I mean, it happens. Why does it happen? Just because in some spots, betting is better than checking. And if you have a hand that can get value from a good bit of your opponent's range, but then your opponent accidentally folds a better hand, that's not necessarily that uncommon, you know? And from there, it's just kind of like, well, if my opponent's folding a hand that good, maybe I shouldn't be betting as thin as this. Maybe I should know going in that I'm bluffing with this hand in the future. A good example of that would be, let's say that you're in the big blind and you have ace 3 and you flat call an open raise from the button and the flop is ace high and it's like ace 7-5 and you check call the flop and then the turn is an 8, ace 7-5-8 rainbow, and you check call the turn, and then the river is a 10 and you check and they bet. And it's like when they triple barrel there, they have sets and they have 2 pairs and then they have ace X, you know, they're going to have ace jack, ace queen, ace king, and you might, against some of your opponents, if you know that they're going to bet and then call with sets essentially, and they might even fold ace 10, probably not, but they might even fold aces up. You have to assume that they're probably going to call you with most of their aces up, if not all, but if they're betting all the combos of ace X that they can have in that spot, I mean, if they can have ace jack, ace queen, ace king as bluffs, that's 24 combos when you have an ace in your hand. Versus the calling range, let's say, of ace 10 is 6, and then let's say they have 6 sets, right? So that's 12. So if, let's say for simplicity purposes, they have 36 betting combos on the river, 24 of them are folding to a raise, and 12 of them aren't. Well, then your raise on the river is going to work 2/3 of the time. So as long as the price you're giving yourself is like that or better, you're showing a profit in that spot. And if your opponent starts folding even more hands that are higher up in his range, then that's sick. Now he's really overfolding. So you can bluff the living hell out of him. I'm going to raise it up with our ace 8 of hearts combo. But that's why combinatorics are so important, because that's how you can figure out these things. You can sort of take it apart and say, well, I think he has this many combos versus this many combos, so that means I'm going to get called this frequently, or I can make him fold 75% of his range, etc., etc. And then we have top pair, backdoor nut flush draw, relatively ragged board, definitely going to be betting. Not super interested in getting check raised, but it's definitely a bet. We raise it up with the button with our queen 10 offsuit. You'd like to get the folds, but we're probably going to get heads up or maybe even back jammed on by the weirdo. I don't know why that avatar is a chick with no hair. You know what that avatar looks like? It looks like fucking Alfred E. Newman. So this is a relatively dry board texture. We are just going to go ahead and continuation bet relatively small here. We don't even need to bet that big. Like 2 is too big. 1.8 is fine. If they don't have something like 9s or 10s here, which we block, and they don't have 10-8, and they don't have 2 diamonds. I mean, granted, there's a lot of combos that can continue there, but for the most part, they're going to play relatively straightforward. It's a difficult board to hit or interact with very well, and even a portion of their range that calls the flop can be bluffed on later streets. We have a suited queen. We're going to raise it up blind versus blind. And it looks like we're going to get that fold. Alright guys, thank you for joining me for this part of the video. We're just going to go ahead and wrap this hand up. Yeah, alright, that's going to be it. And we will see you guys for the next video. Be back in just a few minutes.